In 1995, Sierra Online released Roberta Williams' latest adventure game, Phantasmagoria. Phantasmagoria is a point-and-click adventure horror game featuring copious amounts of full-motion video and an awful lot of sexual and violent material, especially for the time. Now, unlike other similar titles such as Night Trap, this was a more traditional game type, being what Sierra was famous for, which is, of course, point-and-click adventures. However, this utilised pre-rendered backdrops with, instead of handheld sprites, actual video footage of actors being used in their stead and a lot of FMV cutscenes. But is it a good game? Well, keep on watching to find out more. Upon its release in 1995, Phantasmagoria had been in the planning for at least 8 years, according to Roberta Williams herself. Over 200 people were involved in making the title, which saw its budget balloon from a substantial $800,000 US all the way up to $4.5 million by the end. $1.5 million of this was spent building a studio just to film the FMV sequences in. Now, the game itself obviously had to be quite heavily scripted, being a point-and-click adventure and a heavy FMV title, and the script worked out at 550 pages, which is approximately 4 times larger than your average feature film. Now, the game itself features 25 different actors who appear in front of almost 1,000 different visual backdrops, according to the information released at the time. Now, having spent $4.5 million on the title, Sierra needed it to be a big success, and it was. Its first weekend of release saw it gross over $12 million and become one of the best-selling games of the year. The game was very, very heavily promoted at the time and ended up being something that spawned a sequel. Phantasmagoria, A Puzzle of Flesh, released a year later without the involvement of Williams. Now, the game itself was a big departure for Williams and Sierra somewhat. Best known for designing the family-friendly King's Quest games, Roberta Williams didn't want to get typecast and had a long-seated love of crime, murder and horror stories. Therefore, she decided to create a game in that mode, hence Phantasmagoria. However, it did take 8 years for her to go from the original concept of a horror point-and-click game to the actual production of the title, because the technology for what she wanted to achieve just wasn't there. Now, Phantasmagoria, as I said, was heavily reliant on CD-ROMs and FMV. In fact, the game itself ships on a massive 7 CD-ROMs, which for the time was almost unheard of. However, it's necessary. The game is probably one of the better uses of FMV during that early CD-ROM cycle when compared to some other titles out there, such as, say, Sewer Shark, which were basically a shooting gallery. Now, the game itself. Here we go. Successful mystery novelist Adrienne Delaney and her photographer husband Don Gordon have just purchased a remote mansion off the coast of a small New England island which had previously been owned by the famous 19th century magician Zoltan Karnovash. Now, Karnovash had been married 5 times, and each of those wives died mysteriously. Upon moving into the new house, Adrienne begins to have horrible nightmares and visions of death and destruction. But she is supported by her husband Don. As she explores the estate, we come to realise that Carno the magician was a black magician, and he attempted to summon an evil demon which ultimately possessed him and caused him to murder his wives. During the course of the game, Adrienne also discovers a hidden chapel and unknowingly releases the demon which possesses Don. Don then starts to act in an incredibly chilling way, and in what is probably a first for a video game, rapes Adrian. Thankfully, you don't actually see this in any form of real detail, but there's enough there to make you feel distinctly uncomfortable. Now, ultimately, you have to figure out how to either take the demon out of Don or kill Don and destroy the demon itself. That's the gist of the game. It's a point and click adventure where you have to save the heroine. Interestingly, despite some of the more distasteful elements of the game, such as the rape, as I've noted, this game was written by Roberta Williams, a female. This did deflect somewhat from any claims of misogyny or misogynistic attitude inherent in the title. Now, in terms of sales, it's believed that Phantasmagoria shifted over 600,000 units in its first year and ended up as the 9th best-selling PC title of that year, behind other titles such as Microsoft Flight Simulator, Myst, another major CD-ROM contributor, and the original Command & Conquer. Now, I personally purchased it on CD-ROM in the late 90s, by which point apparently it had managed to shift more than 1 million units, which is incredibly impressive. Now, I'm not saying this is the greatest point and click adventure of all time, I wouldn't be that daft, but it is an incredibly enjoyable point and click no matter what. The plot is pretty good, the puzzles are logical as you would expect from a Sierra game, certainly more logical than some of the stuff you find in some of the LucasArts titles such as Monkey Island. And even though the FMV does date the title somewhat, being of a somewhat lower quality in a small window, it still helps with the game's atmosphere. The game, its plot, the way it plays out wouldn't have worked with traditional sprites or even hand-drawn animations. It needed to be FMV to do the story justice. Anyway, if you can get this game, and it is available on GOG and Steam, I do recommend it. It's worth playing through. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, hit the like. If you really enjoyed it, subscribe to the channel. Leave me a comment below, ring the notification bell, and hey, come find me on Twitter. You'll find me on Twitter as @8_16_32bit. I've been Rob. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.